All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for having us. We are from the University of Wisconsin, and this is Nudge by Longevity Solutions. So just to start, Nudge is a mobile app designed to help women with PCOS infertility by reducing insulin resistance through behavioral change. And this is our team. My name is Megan. I'm a fourth-year medical student, a mother of toddlers, and a future OBGYN.
And I'm Rufus. I'm a fourth-year med student. I'm going into psychiatry. I'm also a father to a rowdy but enthusiastic 3.5-year-old. And my partner struggled with blood sugar issues during her pregnancy. We're both drawn to this problem because it represents the intersection of our specialties of interest, utilizing behavior change science to help people who are experiencing infertility to have more control over their ability to conceive. We'll be presenting today, but not shown here are many team members and advisors who we're really excited to collaborate with.
So just for some background, PCOS, or polycystic ovary syndrome, is a disease that affects almost 5 million women in the United States, or around 1 in 8 women of childbearing age. Chances are pretty high that you know someone with PCOS, and it's one of the most common causes of infertility, if not the most. It turns out that it's an expensive problem. Infertility treatment for PCOS costs almost $4 billion in the United States every year. And what's more is that infertility is a problem that affects women differently across racial and ethnic lines. Studies show that not only do Black and Hispanic women have higher rates of infertility than their Caucasian counterparts, but they're also less likely to receive treatment. Now, the pathophysiology of PCOS, as you can see here, is quite complex. But fundamentally, if we distill it down, PCOS is a hormone imbalance associated with insulin resistance. So insulin resistance is when your body's cells don't recognize the signal, or insulin, that normally tells the cells when to remove sugar or glucose from the bloodstream, where glucose can be really dangerous at high levels. And insulin resistance can actually be reversed with physical activity alone. This has been shown to be true even independent of changes in weight.
So it's simple enough in concept, but in our conversations with patients struggling with infertility due to PCOS, they would be frustrated by the fact that when they went to their physician, they would be told things like, find a hill and walk up it. The counsel is neither specific nor actionable by and large. They're left with questions like, when is the best time to move? What type of physical activity is best for reversing insulin resistance? And for how long? Perhaps most importantly, how can I be sure that what I'm doing is actually working? Nudge aims to solve these problems by starting with foundational education first. And this happens with onboarding and throughout the user's experience in the 1 to 2 month program. We help the person track key biometrics in our app using a fitness tracker and a continuous glucose monitor. Our machine learning algorithm learns when the person is about to experience a glucose excursion or a glucose spike that's heading out of their normal healthy range. And then we make actionable recommendations of exercise intensity, type, and duration. Each part of this, intensity, type, and duration, relates to augmented intelligence. And I'll break down what that looks like practically in the next few slides. The first is timing. When should the user engage in exercise? As we found in the literature, it's usually just before the glucose excursion occurs. That's why we built our AI to predict an excursion 30 minutes in advance when insulin is beginning to take its effect. And that way you get the benefit of your body's hormonal mechanisms combined with the insulin independent uptake of blood sugar that you get from physical activity. It's one thing to be warned of a glucose excursion though, and it's another thing to know how to act on it. That's why we're also applying augmented intelligence to help people to know how to move. So what type of exercise should we do and for how long? The answer to that is also clear from the literature and from our user experience interviews. People do not want to engage in super vigorous exercise after eating, as you might expect, like HIIT training. So even if they were willing, it turns out, it still wouldn't be the optimal form of physical activity, because it turns out that the optimal form of physical activity is called zone 2 aerobic exercise, at least in terms of lowering your blood glucose. This is the intensity of exercise at which you can maintain a conversation. So it's roughly 70% of max heart rate. And it's best for disposing of glucose at the skeletal muscle. As for how long, we will apply augmented intelligence to determine optimal duration in a personalized and individual way. So in that way, we're going to use augmented intelligence both in the identification of where an individual's zone 2 is likely to be and in their duration of exercise that they should engage in. But the thing that personally excites me the most about what we're doing is we're deploying behavior change techniques to keep people coming back over and over again. And one of those is that I'm really excited to talk about is the nudge score. And this is new. The nudge score is what we're planning to work on for the next few months, ideally during this competition. And it's dynamic. It adjusts the weight of variables like time to initiation of an active period or time spent in zone 2 during an active period, and other variables which are known to correlate with glucose reduction. It changes the weight based on what is most likely to change someone's blood glucose, reduce their blood glucose in the short term and make them more insulin sensitive in the long term. When each time a person acts on an invitation to move, they're going to be given a score along with a specific actionable feedback about how to improve their score. As a side note, the term augmented intelligence really appeals to me because it's all about informed consent. Informed meaning they have sort of the interpretable information, and consent meaning they're brought in or they're really bought in and they're ready to act out based on the information that they're learning about. And so that's really our core competency as Nudge is we're the layer of information, interpretation, insight, and behavior change. We've ideated on this idea as Nan alluded to for a couple of years, and we participated last year in this competition. We're really proud of the progress we've made, especially in the last 6 months. We've talked to more than 30 potential users and demoed the product with a lot of them. We've developed a mobile application that is nearly ready for release on the App Store and for clinical trial. We built a relationship with the IRB at the University of Wisconsin, as well as Dr. Laura Cooney, who's a reproductive endocrinologist and infertility specialist here. We built a relationship with Dexcom research support, and they've agreed to supply devices for our clinical trial, up to hundreds of devices, should we request that. And we've worked to get as many ducks in a row with the resource constraints that we've been given. We're excited to participate in this competition, primarily because not just for the financial reward potentially, but for the access to non-monetary resources like data sets and mentor relationships that we'll build throughout the program over the next 7 months. But the progress we made hasn't been without its obstacles as well. Along the way, we've also encountered some obstacles and come up with, we'll say, creative solutions to overcome them. For example, we've interviewed many people with a variety of illnesses caused by insulin resistance, including female-specific conditions like gestational diabetes. And in the case of gestational diabetes, they would have liked a solution like Nudge, almost precisely what we're working on, but patients viewed their condition, gestational diabetes, as self-limited. In other words, after birth, they viewed it as sort of, that's the end of my condition, and so they didn't feel like the problem was as pressing. With PCOS, the users are extremely motivated. A lot rides on their ability to conceive. And it feels pressing in a way that other problems just haven't been for other types of users. And there's a lot at stake when you're trying to conceive. And the alternative treatments like in vitro fertilization are multiple tens of thousands of dollars and are often paid for out of pocket. Another issue we've come into has been more technical in nature. The FDA has imposed a 3-hour delay on continuous glucose monitoring for third-party apps. That means we hit a sticking point at step 1 of our glucose prediction, and we are unable to send notifications in a timely way. But we've worked with Dexcom, the continuous glucose monitor manufacturer, to create a workaround solution that can't be commercialized, but we're able to deploy a clinical trial at the least. We're also working with Dexcom to gain access to their limited release real-time API, which they've been releasing very slowly into more established companies. Ethical considerations, I'll pass it over to Megan for that.
Thanks, Rufus. So to basically, what we've been working on is that to inform the machine learning model, we first want to use training data that deliberately represents women of various backgrounds, so as not to design our tool around a single demographic. And this is particularly important because what we mentioned earlier is that Caucasian women are more likely to seek fertility treatment. So if by just including them, we might accidentally further an already existing disparity across racial lines in who's actually getting treated for this problem. We've also considered including a synchronized tool for partners. And basically, we want to be supportive of partnership as part of the infertility journey. It involves a whole family sometimes, and enable our participants, or those who want to be included, to include their own allies without stigmatizing their own progress on weight or diet or exercise by incident transparency. So these are the main challenges we want to focus on between now and the finals, and are still working hard on them as they really do inform our overall mission, which is that, here at Nudge, we believe in reproductive justice. We define that as a person having complete autonomy over whether to have or not to have a child, and to raise that child in an equitable environment. So as part of that mission, we aim to reduce insulin-related infertility by 50% in women with PCOS by 2030. We'll be happy to take questions. Judges?
I have a few, but I'll start with one. What were the to address some of the diversity objectives that you were trying to achieve? What are the cultural elements that you have, and just in regards to the tech component, right? The Latino community, but all the different communities. What makes it more adaptable in those communities? Have you learned?
So go ahead, Megan. You spearhead this.
Okay, I'll start, and then please feel free to jump in whenever. But one thing that we understand about infertility treatment is both infertility treatment and insulin resistance treatment is that they're both extremely costly. For infertility, the reason is because the treatments can cost up to $30,000 per, and it requires more than one for each round. And then in terms of the other options for fertility treatment and for insulin resistance, the other beyond behavioral changes like we're suggesting is pharmacological mainly as your only treatment option. So introducing a hormonal change by medicine is not very desirable, and in communities that may have other barriers to access, such as cost and things like that.
Yeah, another thing, and admittedly, one of our blind spots has been the Hispanic community, engaging the Hispanic community. But we've focused a lot on the Black community and on the Indigenous community, and their particular problems are those of access, like Megan mentioned. Frankly, it's expensive in terms of just like absolute cost to subscribe to CGM, continuous glucose monitoring, and things like that. But yeah, the alternative treatments are out of reach for many women, unfortunately, especially of those communities. And so actually, one of the benefits in participating in the Big Ten AI, or the now Third Coast, is that it's going to be important for us to get in front of stakeholders of those communities, and honestly, just being able to connect with them via the connections of this competition will be very helpful, I think, in elucidating those things.
And just to speak to your question about cultural representation, I think that part of our goal in including women of varying backgrounds in our data set also gives us the opportunity to make connections. And I think that in any advocacy work, representation of those communities is extremely important. So I think that by just opening the doors to include them, we can make open communication both ways that discusses some of the differences that we might not be able to anticipate if we personally aren't a member of the cultures that we talk about.
All right, team. Let me ask you a question. Maybe I missed this. I'm sorry if I did miss this. First of all, I love your presentation. It was very nice, very smooth, very clear. However, I missed the connection between polycystic ovary syndrome and a lot of the features that Nudge offers, because I can see for any kind of diabetes that is tied from gestational, type 2, prediabetes, that is tied to exercise and diet and behaviors and things like that you can help with the Nudge. Polycystic ovary syndrome is a pretty specific disease that I'm not sure how is affected by all these things. And actually, I literally don't know. So maybe you can educate me a little bit more.
Yeah, let me reshare actually. Go back to that slide. Just for benefit of imagery.
I can start us off while you get us there.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that one of the reason that the patient population with PCOS is like, it kind of brings together variables that align in order to make this kind of intervention work. One of those is that PCOS, and because of its association with insulin resistance and anovulation, which means not ovulating, sometimes a result of hormonal imbalance itself, it is one of the leading causes, if not the leading cause, of infertility. So that, combined with the fact that women who are seeking to conceive and families who are looking to solve the infertility problem are much more motivated than others, at least based on our research and our initial data, to actually do behavioral change in order to make a difference for their own physiology. Unfortunately, I wish that the behavioral change were more of a motivator for other populations, but we didn't find that to be true so much as we do in the group trying to conceive. So that's how PCOS relates to infertility. Does that answer your question, or do you want to know more about the physiology?
Yeah, because one of my judges actually privately, so let me ask you the question a different way. If you do lose weight and you improve your glucose, is that enough for you to conceive if you have PCOS, or do you need to address your hormone imbalance, all the other hormonal issues, and remove the cysts?
The answer is yes. So there was a recent publication last year, I think 2020, maybe it was this year, Megan, you can correct me, but it said for every degree, I don't remember how they measured it exactly, but for every incremental improvement in insulin resistance, you became much more likely to conceive. And so just using the transitive property, if you have a person who's insulin resistant and you leverage whatever ways you can to make them insulin sensitive, whether that's losing weight or increasing physical activity or giving them metformin, yes, they are much more likely to conceive that way.
And the relationship between insulin resistance and fertility has been shown. Increasing insulin sensitivity increases fertility likelihood. And so we take a population where insulin resistance is a part of the disease process, and we can affect one and thereby affect the other. The other great thing about insulin is that it's truly systemic, is that its impact is truly systemic. And so not only might you see benefit in weight, but in your metabolism in general, and in the truly in the homeostasis of your whole body, if you're seeking to change one of those really systemic hormones.
Thank you, Dean.
So I have a question. Go ahead. I'll take a stab and then give it to Karandeep. So just quick short answer. Have you guys thought about the scope being too limited here because you're so focused on PCOS, but really, I mean, nudge could be applicable to 15 other populations the way you've described it. I follow you on the slide that you had where it's like it's self-limited, but the biggest problem, and this is what I do every day, is getting engagement. And so you have 15 populations potentially engaging. You can then have test cases across multiple different populations. And then the integration of activity monitors to this in addition, I think if I heard you correctly, you're doing activity monitoring plus Dexcom monitoring, is that correct? And so how do you plan on using the integration of both sets of data to then guide different interactions and prompting different activities?
So
it's one thing for one of them, and it's like, great, I have activity monitoring, I'm going to prompt this. I have glucose monitoring, I'm going to prompt this, but then there's going to be overlaps and potentially contradictions based on the data. What do you do in that case?
Okay, yeah, perfect. So the second question, that's really, really good. First question is easy. We view PCOS as an excellent beachhead, but yes, we have thought about expanding into other places as well. Building those communities simultaneously is something that we have considered, but it's often easier to just find 1,000 really obsessive followers and then grow from there rather than trying to appeal to everybody at the same time. Sorry, I'm short on time, so I'm trying to answer quickly. The second question is, in a multivariate equation, it's really difficult when variables potentially might collide and conflict with one another. Our AI is going to function in a way where our inputs are clearly discrete, such that the outputs are clearly related to the specific inputs that you're putting in. And so in the case of physical activity, that's why we decided to focus on that alone, sort of as the variable of interest, because there isn't as much interaction between that and like nutrition, and if you try and collect everything at the same time, right, and put all that into a machine learning algorithm. So we think it's actually a pretty simple sort of formulaic thing that is definitely enhanced by AI, but much easier to sort of nail down than it is to do all of the variables, sleep, nutrition, things like that.